Welcome back, everybody. We're here in the booth for the NRG Series Modern 5K Trial. My name is Anurag Das. I'm here with Julian Knapp. We're going into round 3 now. Thank you so much for your patience during the downtime. We have an exciting feature match now, Julian. We have Justin Brickman playing a new version of 4-color control featuring not Yorion, but Kaheera against tried and true veteran of the NRG Series, Zoe Riederman on Living End. This is going to be a sweet one. Let's see if we can take a look at deck lists. But Julian, talk to me about the matchup. How do you feel about it?
Well, it's kind of funny, right? You look at this as a control player and you feel like, okay, technically a combo deck, I should be able to beat that, right? I only need to beat the Living Ends. Not always. You know, there's ways where the Living End player is able to take out your counter spells with the griefs that we see here, maybe even fight back with something like a Force of Negation. Or, and that's the coolest scenario that we sometimes on rare occasions see coming up, is by literally hardcasting creatures to get there. So if your control plan is to just counter the Living End, it's not always going to work out. You will have to present something like, for example, I believe if you get a Teferi Time Raveler in play, it's going to make it all the much harder to even resolve or cast your Living End in the first place. So this is one of those rather classic matchups of Modern, even though the 4-color control deck has basically changed quite a bit. The Living End deck has rather remained the same with new creatures coming in. So yeah. I'm always excited to see this in action.
Yeah. And speaking of action, looks like the players are ready. So let's get into the feature match booth. We'll take a look at Justin Brickman's 4-color control list in a moment. But Kaheera revealed, it looks like a lot of the components are basically the same. You know, a bevy of Teferis, a bevy of Wrenn and Sixes. The top end being Omnath and Teferi, hero of Dominaria. And then all the removal in the world that you could ask for: Leyline Binding, Lightning Bolt, Prismatic Ending, and only 3 copies of Counterspell. So it basically looks like, you know, we took the 80 card version and prorated from 80 down to 60, and that's a good baseline.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always down for that, especially since it makes shuffling all that much easier, as Wizards told us, right? Interestingly, we see 4 copies of Solitude, right? So if we actually put Solitudes in our graveyard at some point, then we can even have some counterplay against the Living End without even trying to fight over the actual Living End by getting the Solitudes back. It's probably not going to win the game, but it's going to make it a little bit harder for Justin to set up a game-winning Living End early on. But right now, I guess Living End is just going to do what Living End does, and that is gonna be a lot of cycling.
Yeah, we see Breeding Pool here shocked in on Zoe's second turn, which probably indicates the, you know, at least 1 cycler on the end step, and maybe even 2, and that leaves you in prime position to, you know, put multiple creatures into play on the 3rd turn here. We'll see if there's any. Yeah, oh, look at this. A lot of creatures in the graveyard now.
Yeah, this is basically what you want to do. And ideally, when you're gonna play against a deck featuring Counterspell, right? The idea scenario is you fire off something like a Violent Outburst on their end step, make them commit the mana to Counterspell, untap, and try again. That's one of the classic ways to play around Counterspells. And I'm not even sure if Counterspells are going to be all that relevant here, right? We see a basic Forest on Justin's side of the board right now.
Oof, this Grief.
Yeah.
Actually terrifying. Wrenn and Six on turn 2, good to buy back a land, but Grief reveals a hand of Lightning Bolt and land. Fortunately, you have Boseiju and Otawara, but I don't know if that's going to be good enough here. Shardless Agent comes down on turn 3. Yeah, and Justin just picks up his cards and says, yeah, all right, we're going to do another game here. So
scoop it up.
Yeah, exactly. Knowing that, you know, even my 1 removal spell is gone, but like the board of Curator of Mysteries would have been hard to go through anyways. So let's take a look at Justin Brickman's 4-color control list and see what the sideboard options are. But on a high level, I mean, you can see this is basically the same strategy as with Yorion, but now that we have 20 fewer slots to play, you know, we are picking and choosing which cards we will keep. And it looks like the main winners are the Planeswalkers, Omnath, Leyline Binding, and Solitude, whereas cards like Lightning Bolt, Prismatic Ending, and even Counterspell are all being shaved. Talk to me about the sideboard here. What's interesting for you?
Yeah, the coolest thing you can do is just you get those 3 copies of Chalice of the Void out there. You get them down for 0, which is going to counter all of the potential Living Ends that are going to come your way. So you force your opponent to interact with you. It's basically a 0 mana hate bear in that sense. So I'm excited for that. Other than that, Dovin's Veto sounds reasonable. It depends on how much of an actual counter war you might expect. You could bring in something like Veil of Summer. It also stops Grief. But in the end, it's gonna depend on how much you want to shave. Like you already mentioned, a couple of cards are gonna go out. I could see some of the planeswalkers going out, right? So that's one way. On the other hand, when you look at the 4-color deck, you also have to close out the game somehow at some point, and there's not too many like other creatures. Like you do. My initial reaction was, do we want to shave some of the Omnath? Maybe. I don't know how much we need to respect the grind potential from Living End.
Yeah, that is a really good point, and I think maybe you just don't, right? Cards like Dress Down don't do too much. You could slim down on some of the more expensive stuff for more interactive pieces. What's really interesting though is, do we have any real graveyard hate elements in this deck? No endurances, right? No Eladamri's Call, and in the sideboard, I only really see. I mean, for creatures, we have a plan, right? Supreme Verdict, and we have Veil of Summer, but I don't see much in the way of actually handling the graveyard. So that could be something that is a quote unquote fundamental flaw in this updated iteration of 4-color control. But you got to start somewhere, and I appreciate that Justin Brickman is bringing in what might be the trendsetter 4-color control list here. Let's take a look at Zoe Riederman's deck as quickly as we can, as players are probably almost done sideboarding. And yeah, wow, this is somewhat of a stock main deck. I'm trying to see if there's anything interesting in the sideboard. What are the cards you'd like to bring in from the Living End side?
I guess that's not even all that much that you really need, right? I guess if you expect something like the Chalices, then you might bring in some Force of Wiggers, or maybe even just like a Boseiju. You already have some in the main deck, I would assume. Actually, we don't see any of the Boseijus in the main deck, so that's certainly a card I want to bring in. Brazen Borrow is kind of like a catch-all answer, but there's not really too much you really want to change up here. One interaction that I really, really like is, we talked about the Supreme Verdict in the 4-color control deck, right? It's almost kind of like a trap when you feel like, oh, I could Supreme Verdict post Living End, because a lot of times Living End is going to bring back a grief, and that grief is going to take out the Supreme Verdict. So definitely be careful with that if that's going to be your game plan, as we have no ways of floating it on top of our library like we do in other formats.
Yeah, I would also say cards like Foundation Break are very good against Chalice of the Void, and even something like Subtlety is something to think about going into the post board games when your opponent knows, like, you're playing a Cascade deck. Cards like Teferi become that much more terrifying, and so having access to something like Subtlety is a question that I'm sure Zoe already knows the answer to, but we'll find out shortly how the sideboarding process goes. And then the trick is also like figuring out, if you're boarding in all these creatures, what are you allowed to board out? And it seems like that is the hard part here. Maybe you just like are laterally swapping certain cards like Brazen Borrower for something like Foundation Breaker. I'm not sure how you'd make space for things like Subtlety. Maybe some of the weaker cyclers can be shifted out in lieu of cards like Subtlety that give you a little bit more interaction. But then it's also tricky because you want to make sure you have enough, blue cards to pitch for Subtlety and things like that. A lot of nuance, basically. And okay, perfect. We're into the game here, the first post-board game here. Justin Brickman.
One more question, Anurag. Do you think the 4th copy of Living End is going to come in? I guess that's there for like the rather grindy matchups where you want a Living End as many times as possible.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, the last copy of Living End also could be good against like the second Supreme Verdict. Like, let's say your board gets cleared and then it gets cleared again, having extra copies is not a bad thing to have.
Yeah, and I mean, I could even see a game developing where you literally just suspend Living End on the 4th turn, and then you watch it tick down, and the opponent has to do something about it. Ideally, one of those cards that like probably is going to give you the best counterplay. You already mentioned this Teferi, Time Raveler. So you're probably spot on here, right, on the subtleties, because we really need to deal with Teferi. Otherwise, our deck is going to be in big trouble.
Yeah, I mean, that assumes there are no black mana sources in the deck, so I don't think you're going to be able to actually suspend Living End.
Oh, there are no black mana sources? Yeah, look at me.
It's one of those weird things, right? Like I the first time I learned that, I was also like, wait, what? Okay, but a Living End is just so powerful with all the cyclists and stuff that it's actually just worth it. So we'll see here.
Yeah,
Justin's on a mulligan to 6, so the game is not. I expect Justin to have mulligan 2 interaction, and we see it here already. Chalice of the Void on 0 on turn 1. That gets force of negation with the swiftness.
That's basically the best way to deal with it. You really want to get rid of that card. Other than maybe you already mentioned, right, Foundation Breaker. That's another good card. Also put something into the graveyard. But for now, we'll have to see what both players are up to. Justin fetching here. Probably what are you gonna do in the second turn, right? The second turn is where you still have like free reign. There's nothing that Zoe's gonna do on the like on the untap with 2 mana, so you're free to run out, I don't know, Wrenn and Six, even though I'm not sure it's still in the deck anymore. And it's just, yeah, land and pass, but it's an untapped breeding pool. So what are we gonna do with that untapped breeding pool?
If I'm in Zoe's seat right now, I think, that's a red flag for something like Counterspell. Otherwise, well, let's see here first. Does Zoe actually have a second land? That would be...
She's definitely digging.
Okay.
Street
I think I
Race,
see a copy of
Deeper?
Steam Vent, so I think we're actually okay. Not the end of the world here. Street Wraith
That's
getting
gonna come into play
cycled.
tapped.
Okay. All right. We have a match. Whew. All right. I've seen a couple hands here before where there was one feature match in that I think actually Zoe was in, where her opponent was playing 4-color and just kept a no-lander with like Endurance and Veil, and then just peeled Flooded Strand off the top for like the first turn or something. It was the dirtiest thing I've seen in a while. But speaking of which, we actually have fireworks going off already here as Charlotte's Agent is in play on turn 3. And that's going to pick up a Living End and put a couple creatures into play.
Yeah, hopefully a Living End. Maybe all of them have been sided out. We're going to take a look at almost the entire deck soon. And yeah, if Justin doesn't have a counterspell here, it's already lights out pretty much because we are still pretty far from something like Supreme Verdict. But we shall see. It's one of the more filthy things that are not going to happen here, I guess, is once you bring back Architects of Will, but those are exiled, you can mess up your opponent's draw step for the next couple of turns as well. That's always something I really enjoyed.
I do find that quite terrifying, yeah.
And we're going to take... okay, so Justin's taking a look at the cards that have been, well, not exactly milled. They're going to return to the deck. That have been flipped over to get a better idea of how Zoe actually sideboarded. And here's, oh sweet, the Tempest counterspell. What is your favorite counterspell art?
Oh, it's the original art. Easy. Not even close. I think second favorite might be like the full art that was that came out in like Modern Horizons 2.
Uh-huh.
And then dual decks Chandra Jace is also is it
come on. Oh come on, you were so close to getting like only good ones.
yeah. I mean that one's like it's not like my favorite one, but it's like probably like the third. I don't know. The other ones are like so, but I mean like the OG one is the only one that I own, so.
Yeah, that's very timeless. It's also one of the most famous Magic artworks, I believe. Like it's up there. Everybody has seen that one. You know what I wanted to do back in school? I feel so... Well, back in school, I thought it would be so cool if I created a necklace that had a counter spell on it, and I could walk around, and whenever somebody was getting on my nerves,
wait, that is like, extremely cool. What are you talking about? That is so cool. Yeah.
I needed you. You should have told me that this was cool because I ended up not doing it.
Oh dang. Okay. Well, let's see. This is interesting. So it actually looks like Justin is the one who is not making land drops here, which is kind of the kiss of death here, as Charlotte's Agent does swing in for 2. Let's see. Waker of Waves is going to cycle and get some quote-unquote selection, I guess. Maybe bracing for another Living End here. But yeah, this is not looking so good for Justin. But that must mean that Justin has lots of interaction, right?
Yeah, but the thing is, Zoe starts having like a lot of lands in play, so we are nearing a point where Zoe could just like take full advantage of Justin maybe sitting behind a couple more, Dovin's Veto. I just saw maybe Force of Negation. All of that doesn't really do all that much against like the just like a flood of creatures that might hit the board at some point naturally from the hand.
Yeah, just like hard casting. Like the analogy that I love to say is like just like walking up slowly and down smashing. You can see here on the end step, violent outburst that is definitely not walking up slowly, as we're going to try to dig for another copy of Living End. There it is, close to the top this time.
Yeah, and that's probably going to hit the Dovin's Veto we just saw in hand. Maybe there's something else.
Yeah, this is definitely the spell to Dovin's Veto here, and you can see Justin does not hesitate. Dovin's Veto on the stack.
Yeah, that's just like way too much stuff that could totally mess you up here. But Zoe's fine, right? Zoe's just going to untap. Okay, well, we keep doing this game while our Shuttle's Agent just keeps speeding in there. Yeah, take 2 more. Almost took away half of your life total by now.
The 2/2 that could. Choo-choo.
And we see 1 copy of Living End in hand already. Living End in hand already. And you mentioned, right, this deck doesn't have access to any kind of black mana. So any Living End you draw, That's it. It's not going to happen again. And we already saw 2 living ends dealt with, if I remember correctly. So that leaves only 1 living end left to do something in this game. Am I correct on this?
Yeah, but that's also assuming that Zoe even boarded it in to begin with. So maybe we're actually just out of suspend spells to cast. But I think if that were the case, then we would have seen Zoe start hard casting creatures, or maybe it's just because that land came into play tap this turn that we haven't seen it yet. But I think the next turn will very clearly indicate how the rest of the game is going to be played out. And I, for one, am. If Justin is able to win this game, I'm going to say it right now. This will be like a highway robbery.
Well, Justin is sitting on a ton more counterspells. I think I saw at least 1 more, if not 2 more. But this hate bear, not even hate bear, this literally, what's it called, a gray ogre, 3 mana 2/2, it just keeps getting in there. And Justin literally has 4 more turns to make something happen. And counterspells are not gonna cut it. Yeah, sure. Chalice on 0, I guess.
Okay. That's not bad. That does stop the future copies of Living End. Yeah, that's right. And I think I saw a copy of Subtlety in Zoe's hand as well. So I think we're actually just going to see the fair beatdown plan here. Flash into 3/3 on the end step, and then okay, never mind. Okay, here's Waker of Waves.
This is the mimic, that meme. This is what they do to mimic a fraction of our power. This is when I feel people using that Waker of Waves mode to try to preordain or ponder in Modern. Yeah, and 1 more line, and I think at this point we're really ready to just like throw down whatever kind of hate pair. Okay, Solitude is a good one, even though of course we would have loved to have had it as a hard cast there, but the mana just not available for us right now. That's gonna take out the Shardless Agent and provide at least, well, you already mentioned it, Subtlety. That card loves to do what it does here.
This is actually kind of hilarious, right? We're fighting over not like some sort of absurd board like a 7/7 coming in. No, it's just a literal 2/2.
That's just way too strong, man. We gotta get rid of that. Can't have that. Counterspell. Yeah, and this is at some point, you have to pay a price when playing these pitch spells, right? And getting your chalices on 0 down and stuff. Like you run out of cards. And by now, Justin, what do you see? Like 3 cards in hand? That's still okay, I guess. But we probably need to make something. On the other hand, Zoe thus far hasn't really played any kind of big creatures yet. Had to keep up the subtlety for now. I would guess the next turn, right? That's the one where we expect some kind of. I just want the hard cast to happen, man. I want like, what's the biggest, baddest thing we have in the deck? Like Stripped Riverwinder or something. I want that to come down.
Yeah, something like that, right?
Man, Hexproof. Like, how are you even gonna deal with that if it ever hits the board?
Well, we did hit land number. Oh, there it is. Okay. Creatures are going to slowly enter the battlefield 1 at a time. And this is going to be so hilarious if Justin actually has to counterspell this just to stay alive. Because this is a 2-turn clock, right?
Yeah, pretty much like 4/4 flying. And whenever you cycle this card, I think you get to scry 1. That's a really good card on a like pretty empty board where you're playing what I want to call like sealed magic at this point.
I can sort of hear like
mysteries.
The magic school bus just like screeching counterspell. Yes, this is what you want to see, right? Pure, just like a back and forth slog, limited magic in Modern. Oh man,
we see the Otawara come down. That indicates to me that we really want to build up to Stripped Riverwinder mana. Otherwise, the Otawara would be like pretty cool to maybe get rid of a blocker or something. No, we will actually build up to 7 mana here, and that's what's available next turn for Zoe. And the Riverwinder might actually become a thing.
It's one of the better threats in this. If we're talking about hard casting, it's one of the better threats here. But speaking of threats, looks like we're going to add Kaheera to the hand. Now, what's interesting is that Justin had the option to play Omnath this turn alongside the fetch land, but the fact that we're not doing that means that maybe the last card in Justin's hand is another piece of interaction. And keep in mind, this is Justin's mulligan to 6, so the fact that we are able to still survive having missed our 3rd land drop for like 4 turns is like quite the turn of events.
Yeah, definitely a testament to the existence of all these pitch cards that came into Modern quite a while ago. I think we used a Force of Negation early on to stay alive, and now we basically are guaranteed to. Well, I was going to say guaranteed to keep our Chalice on 0 in play, but this might actually be just like a hard cast. Yeah, this is just going to get an attack for 3 life. That sounds. That's probably not what the card was put in the deck for right now, but yeah, we're just going to hit you for 3. Sure.
Ooh, there it is. All right. That's the money move right there.
Is it? Oh, it's so hard to see.
Yeah, Waker of Waves is in play now.
Is it the Waker of Waves, dude? All your creatures are gonna get -1/-0. Sweet. And I'm gonna have my 7/7. What you gonna do about it?
This is great. Yeah, you rarely see the hard cast mode of this ever actually happen. But now we actually have a presentable threat. This is a 7/7. We have the 3/1 flyer. And we know Justin's hand has at least Omnath. So the question is, do we have a way to, prolong the game? One Solitude already in the graveyard. It's gonna be
So
tough.
let's say we get Omnath out here. Then we use the fetch land to basically gain 3 life, right? We pay for the fetch land, we gain 4 life. Is that already going to be good enough? What else do we see in hand here that could make a difference?
That's a good
Kaheera
point.
we know about. I think that was an expressive iteration that has been picked up. I think a 5-mana Teferi. Justin is, while building up again, we probably will need to jump block. Probably we're looking to find a Solitude here. That would have helped us out quite a lot. But there's a world where Justin can do this, unless, of course, Zoe just like keeps bringing the pain with the whales. More whales, more serpents. That's what she's here for.
Yeah, it's awkward, very awkward, because we're at 4. So even if we gain 4 life, the fetch land means that we go down to 7, which means the Waker of Waves is lethal through the life gain, which it just unfortunately makes the Omnath have to block. And now you can sort of see Justin elbow on the table. I've been in that position many times myself, just unsure what the best play is here to stabilize. We need that other land to gain a little bit more life, to get another draw step, maybe. And if not,
yeah, Leyline Binding would be sweet here, right? I would guess we could cast it for just 1 mana, given all the lands that we have.
Yeah.
But doesn't look like we got that. The hand looks like it has a lot of value, but usually when you end up in situations like this is exactly the reason why you try to not miss your early land drops to cash on your value before you need what you're ever going to get out of it. So yeah, we might lose the game with a bunch of value in hand, but just not enough time to actually cash it in.
Wait a minute. I think I saw a copy of Leyline Binding in the hand.
Oh, is it? That would be big. That's gonna buy us an untap on the Omnath, and that could completely.
There it is.
Yo,
dude, this card is so good. Check it out.
And this is basically where Zoe's sitting on maybe a Force of Negation if she has it, but if she doesn't, that could be the game.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm already like reaching pretty far into the future, but assuming that there's gonna be no more living ends available and Omnath being as good as it is, this is something. We see a violent outburst in hand, and if it's not getting cast here, well, I guess the Chalice of the Void is also like stopping us from doing anything like that in the first place. But let's see. The 8th land, 9th land, even maybe.
That's not where you want to be. That's a lot of lands in play here on the living end side.
Yeah, I guess we could. Wait, how does this work? Justin is down to 2. What am I missing here? Oh, after the attack. Okay. I thought Brazen Burrow had not yet attacked. Yeah. Okay, cool. So yeah, now we get to use make full use of our Omnath, especially if we had a fetch land that we might find of our expressive iteration here. Justin's still trying to figure out what's the most efficient way to use them. Like in a situation like this, you really don't want to lose the game just because you tapped wrong, and then you find the answer that you thought you could cast but can't. So what you have to respect here is something like dealing with the Chalice of the Void at the end step and then having a violent outburst right away. From what we have seen, Zoe only has the violent outburst. We haven't seen a way to deal with the Chalice here, or even assuming that we have the 4th copy of Living End in the deck in the first place, of course. But this, I'm not sure. This might be headed for another game pretty soon.
Oh man, yeah, you know when the control player picks up the card and is ready to punch in with the clock, he's like, "All right, checking my left. You said I'm at 6. All right, attack." That's when my heart normally drops from the other side of the table, and I think we finally reached that point here. 6 life here, gaining some from the Omnath, and
the only way to get out of this, really, I guess, at this point, is to try to find a 4th copy of Living End and a way to deal with the Chalice. We have access to the 4th copy if it's in the deck through Violent Outburst in hand. I guess we could use Violent Outburst to just like give +1/+0 to our attacking creature here, but that alone is not going to do it. Yeah, pitching maybe the last Living End to Grief to make way for which card?
Oh, we'll find out next time on Dragon Ball. Oh, sorry, wrong show.
I thought this grief was gonna come down to make way for something really big that we want to resolve here, but no, it's oh my god. Oh yeah, sorry. I think at this point, yeah, we're maybe just gonna go to the next game. Let's see.
Well, now Brazen Borrower is in the hand, so we could actually petty theft the Chalice of the Void if we draw something like I don't know how we're supposed to get rid of the Teferi though. Like I don't know.
Yeah,
Pray one time that there's a Dryad Arbor registered in the 75 and fetch it. I'm reaching here. Oh, actually, maybe a second copy of Otawara. That could actually be an out if that's in the 75 somewhere. I don't remember
yeah, we have
seeing
two
it though.
copies. We have two copies. One is in play.
Okay.
The other one could still be available. But we need to have our draw steps go our way like every single turn from now to even try and fight back against and on top of that, Justin still has like 3 cards in hand that he hasn't used yet, so that might also have something to say. And we pack it up. Yeah, game 3 this.
Okay, yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Save up mental energy, save up some time, and what's interesting to me, I think, is that might let us know that Zoe didn't actually board in that last copy of Living End. You could even see it in the sideboard there. Foundation Breaker is also going to be coming in, going into this third game here. Looking at the sideboard again, it's 1 copy of Brazen Borrower, the full playset of Endurances, 2 Foundation Breakers, the full playset of Subtleties, 2 Force of Vigor, the last Living End, and 1 Boseiju. So we talked about this earlier. Julian, walk me through once again some of the cards that you liked. And now that we've gone through game 3, what cards do you expect to see, or how do you think sideboarding changes?
Yeah, we already saw that the Foundation Breakers are going to come in now for the third game. They weren't there in the second game. Subtleties are probably going to stay in. 4th copy of Living End I could see coming in. But of course, that could be some kind of confirmation bias on my end, where it's like, oh, see, we lost because maybe we didn't have the 4th copy available at the right time, so maybe bring it in. Other than that, second copy of Brazen Borrower makes a lot of sense. Allows us to pressure Planeswalkers, allows us to bounce Chalice on 0. And probably the Boseiju. I don't know. I kind of like that. It's basically an uncounterable way to deal with Chalice, so I could see that one coming in as well.
I think I agree with you on there, especially like in a matchup where like you don't necessarily need something like the basic forest or whatever. You could just like laterally upgrade it, things like that. So yeah, those are all good. Let's take a look at the 4-color control side of things. So we did see a couple cards come in. We did see Dovin's Veto. We did see a lot of counter spells, and it seems like Chalice of the Wood as well. It seems like Justin is putting a much higher priority on fighting on the stack than anything else, and that does make sense when that's basically your primary target, right? You're trying to beat the Living End strategy, and you still have enough cards, threats, ways to stabilize against a board state in the later stages of the game between Omnath, Solitude, Teferi. So all in all, I don't think there's anything really tricky about sideboarding here. I mean, like you mentioned, maybe Supreme Verdict is a card that could come in. It seems like it would be good to stabilize on turn 4 should things go disastrously wrong.
Yeah. It depends on how much you really want to take out, right? I mentioned the interaction with Grief coming back from a Living End. That's gonna hurt when it takes out your Supreme Verdict. The one thing I'm always curious about is just like Veil of Summer. We didn't see it in the second game, but we did see that Zoe kept Force of Negation. So now we're up against Force of Negation and Griefs. So maybe that's going to give us a little bit more reason to bring in the whales. I'm not sure. I just feel like there's some stuff we can take out. You already mentioned like some of the removal spells, probably the 5-mana Teferi. I'm not even sure if we take out like some copies of Expressive Iteration. We have a lot of good stuff in the sideboard. It's gonna depend on how much of our value engine we want to remove while still staying competitive with the. Well, we saw the grind approach here, right, and almost worked. So you certainly have to respect that against Living End. And that's something you really know best once you've played the matchup a couple of times.
All right. Well, it looks like Zoe's keeping this hand here. I see a copy of Force of Negation, a Street Wraith, a second Force of Negation. Do we have a Cascade spell? Do we actually have enough lands? But I don't know if you do this too, but right now I'm like tilting my head to the right as if I'm trying to like peek at Zoe's hand, and I'm just like, why am I doing this? And it's not going to get any better. Justin Brickman, on the other hand, going to mulligan once again down to 6. Now, last time Justin was on the play and was able to, develop or sculpt to a hand of many counter spells. And by sculpt, I mean literal London mulligan. So maybe that's not actually sculpting at all. But Justin knows what cards he wants in this matchup. And that alone is a good start.
Yeah, that's worth a lot, especially if you get something like an early Chalice that you don't even have to commit mana for, so your mana is free to do anything else, really. What I've seen on Zoe's hand as well, I think, is another copy of Architects of Will that's going to allow us to dig a little bit deeper, find a couple of more lands. And what is this? Oh, this is interesting. So I guess the reason to cycle in the main phase is to find a grief, right? If we find a grief, we could take out something like a Chalice and Zero right away, but that's not happening right now.
Yeah, and I see a copy of Counterspell in the hand there for Justin, even Leyline Binding as well. So looks like this time the games will continue. Let's see if Justin has a third land drop though, as Island comes into play for Zoe.
Yeah, we're gonna cast Modern Ponder, whatever. is there like any fancy way to name this? Is this Whale Ponder or something?
I really
Valordane. And we're gonna get one of those Triomes, sure.
I believe that's the Raugrin Triome, right?
I'm gonna trust you on that.
Oh, perfect. Yes. Okay, so let's see.
Yeah, and chat is pointing out, right? Those Batman sleeves are absolutely dope. We already saw them yesterday. So yeah, Justin has some really good taste. And I wonder, Anurag, you are known to constantly like re-sleeve your deck. Have you ever like played with any like sleeves that you really enjoyed that were hard to get? I would imagine that's just like something you can't do when you constantly re-sleeve after like every other round.
Yeah, not even close. Every 3 rounds, I have to have something that's easy and accessible and on site. So rarely, although I do think Rodney Bedell SpongeBob sleeves are maybe like the top tier sleeves that I've seen personally on the NRG stream, and those are also pretty great.
So yeah, if you want to get some free sleeves, hang out around Anurag at the events. There might be some laying at the table after a second or third round. Is it something you do? Do you like donate?
Oh yeah, all the time. I'm just like, I don't want to carry these around in my bag. Does anybody want these? And then people are like, yeah, you know what? How long have you used them? I'm like, 3 rounds. They're pretty old. And they're like, well, you said what?
So you must actually be pretty relieved that Yorion is banned in Modern then, because now resleeving doesn't take nearly as long.
I just started playing Yorion in Legacy, and oh my goodness, the panic of like having to resleeve 80 cards instead of 60. That's a lot more work.
I mean, that's 33% more cards. That's
okay. Wait a minute. Fireworks. Here we go. We see Grief coming into play now on turn 3. That has to indicate that something is going to happen here. Now, if Justin doesn't have more than one piece of interaction, this might not end well at all.
Yeah, this is the kind of game you want to play, right? You want to shoot out the fireworks early on, once the opponent is weak, once they are not really able to cast all their interaction. Ideally, you do it on the opponent's turn, right? Because then your Force of Negations are going to be live as well. But Grief, of course, clearing the way right now, hopefully meeting a counterspell. But yeah, Justin, it's an interesting point. We see a couple of Force of Negations in hand, so if we had the Violent Outburst, we could wait till the opponent's turn. But on the other hand, we have Justin tapped out right now, so maybe like if we ran into a Dovin's Veto, we would feel pretty stupid.
Yeah, that's tricky too. I mean, it also might just be the wait, is that a Violent Outburst? I'm not 100% sure, but my thought process here is that there's a world where we are also only just playing this Grief on turn 3 to play around an untap into Teferi line if we don't actually have the Cascade spell. But this deck is so, and you can see the Violent Outburst there. Bang, it's happening.
I guess another good reason to do the Violent Outburst right now is that we could get the Grief back to take out something that Justin might have that might interfere with our creatures. So that's going to be some real value, but we have yet to see whether it's going to resolve. Actually, what do we see in the 4-color deck to interact here? Is there anything like
I think Chalice is the only 0-mana spell, and it's not in play, which means that this is all going to resolve very nicely. And Zoe Riederman looking very happy here in this third turn of the game 3. Honestly, this is going to settle who ends up 3-0. So that's a pretty good spot to be in. That's a lot of creatures also coming into play. I missed the double Street Wraith cycle earlier this turn, and oof.
Oh, and that's Supreme Verdict, but that's not going to be... It might not even be quick enough in the first place, even if we got to keep it. But can you calculate the damage that we got in the board right here? That's
nope.
Almost lethal, right?
I'll be honest with you. Last time I was in the booth with Devin, and I was like, oh yes, can you do me a favor and just like take care of all the combat math and all the counting, because creatures, not my jam.
So it looks like 21 damage or something. So either way, the Supreme Verdict might not be doing anything here at all, unless we had some kind of acceleration, like bring Elfish Spirit. Oh, actually, no. Let's not bring Spirit Guides to Modern. We did that before. It was pretty miserable for a while.
Of note here, though, that is a Breeding Pool, not a Zagoth Triome, which means that Leyline Binding is going to cast 2 mana to resolve, and that really does bottleneck your options here. I mean, I think really the only option here is for Brickman's side is to survive this turn, play my land, which I think we saw Otawara, and then untap, draw another land. You basically have to have land Supreme Verdict in the top 2 cards. Quite the pickle that he is in.
Yeah, I guess you would need a combination of like Leyline Binding and Solitude, and then find 2 more lands on the Supreme World. Dude, we're really reaching here. Play to your outs, right? Yeah, we have the 3rd land, we have the 4th land available. We could draw Supreme Verdict. Oh, but this is not what you want to do in a situation like this, right? I mean, if it's the best you can do, but on Zoe's side, I'm fist pumping here under the table. If my opponent casts a card that's not going to change anything while I have lethal on the board, sign me up.
All right, well, here's Expressive Iteration. Now, this is interesting because... Ooh, Chalice of the Void, not like this. Not like this.
Yeah, that's the Leyline Binding you talked about, but we need Leyline Binding and then at least Solitude or something. And
Solitude would be good, yeah.
Yeah.
I highly doubt that there's like a, what is it, a black-white scrubland? Not scrubland. Oops, my age is showing. What is it, Godless Shrine?
Something like, yeah, that's one of the cards that I've never really seen. Yeah, we're just gonna go straight into basic planes here. Snow-covered planes, I believe.
Oh, yeah, Justin just realizing now I can't cast this Leyline Binding, and yeah, I'm dead. Okay. Yep. All right. And that is the power of living in. Zoe Riederman going to move to 3-0. Living End is just like one of those decks where it is merciless, right? Like on the draw, sure, you might have the option to stabilize, but on the play, like it is powerful just like that with all those interactive options, grief, force of negation, subtlety, even in the post-board games. I would be, especially with the way that Justin's deck specifically is built, right? And this is kind of interesting. So let's just like pivot and talk a little bit about how the Yorion ban has affected this matchup, because I think there was a large portion of the way this game played out was probably due to the fact that we're not playing 80 cards anymore. The fact that we're not playing cards like Traverse or cards like Eladamri's Call to tutor up utility creatures like the One of Endurance, right? Like, I think it is a very calculated decision to say, hey, you know what? Like, I don't have space in my deck, so I'm just going to cut Endurance because Endurance is bad in so many matchups. And you sort of see here how, like, getting paired against Living End, Justin got pretty punished.
Yeah, it's actually kind of interesting that you mentioned that we are not running these extra consistency tools like Traverse, the Orphanguard and stuff, because we are only playing 60 cards, which inherently would be more consistent. But if it actually ended up that way, right, that we ended up cutting some of the endurances, then we deprived ourselves of some tactical options that we would have dearly needed in a matchup like that. And then that, of course, in turn overloads the pressure on our sideboard to perform. And yeah, I just hear somebody talking who wishes he had 80 cards back in a way.
Oh,
Am I reading this correctly?
You know what? Like, at the end of the day, we'll just be like, I will submit 80 cards, but with Kaheera instead of Yorion. Like, what's the meme? It's just like, I just want her back, and it's just a picture of like Yorion, like something like that. Honestly, that is really interesting, because like when you also pivot from 80 down to 60 cards, or especially when you like remove the utility of things like Eladamri's Call and Traverse, I mean, your deck building has to radically change. And the approach that Justin took this game was, or just in deck building for this event rather, it's kind of interesting, saying, hey, I will rather stick to the more generic cards like Counterspell, and I will stick to cards like Dovin's Veto that are, applicable on a wide scale, but maybe not necessarily as effective on a wide scale, and just hedge my bets. Like, you can see that the matchup lottery won't always be as kind, and definitely showed in this game.
You know what I'm actually wondering?
What's up?
I gotta say, I'm not as deep into Modern as I am into Legacy, but I think I have a pretty reasonable understanding of the format. I don't really feel like Expressive Iteration is impressing me nearly as much as it does in Legacy. Like, I often see Expressive Iteration in deck lists, but I have yet to really see it perform really well outside of the Murktide decks. Like, in the 4-color control decks, I feel like they're already so clunky whenever they commit to an Expressive Iteration on like the earliest that you can reasonably do it is turn 3. It mostly fails to impress me just because the format is like so cutthroat and it puts so much pressure on doing
Yeah.
stuff that's I'm not sure how good it is. Like maybe you can speak about that a little bit.
It's a little bit different, but before we even get there, I just want to point out that I do believe we have a backup feature match that will be live
Hey.
soon. Yeah, exactly, right? I'm excited. More modern. More modern. Okay. Producer is saying that the backup match is ready, so let's just dive right into that, and I'll talk about that point that you brought up a little bit later. But here we have Max Hirsch. Is this Grixis Shadow? It looks
Looks
like
to
Grixis
be.
Shadow to me. Yeah, with Giganta. Oh, the names might be okay. Yeah, so we have Steven on Grixis Shadow, and then Max on Blue White Hammer. Turn 1, Dragon's Rage Channeler. This is game 3. We are in a do or die situation here. Colossus Hammer in play.
Whew. And Grixis Shadow, that's one of those crowd favorites. Sometimes I feel like whenever I like talk to people who are really enfranchised in the format, and they're like, "Oh, I'm the biggest spike. I play Grixis Shadow." For a long time, I felt like that was the way to go, but it kind of has like it doesn't nearly perform as well as Murktide anymore, does it? I feel like Murktide is definitely the more popular deck of those two aggressive options.
Yeah, there was a period of time where Grixis Shadow was literally everywhere. Stoneforge Mystic coming into play on turn 2, met by Terminate, and during that period of time, I think it was MTGO user Soul Strong who was tearing apart every single online event with Grixis Shadow and really just popularized it through that time. And I have to imagine that now that the meta has sort of adapted, I think 4-color may have sort of pushed it out of the format because I don't know if that matchup was necessarily the best. Not to say that it was bad, but like, 4-color just being 4-color was kind of tricky. So maybe now with Yorion banned, this is a great time for Death Shadow to sort of resurface.
So help me out here. In what ways would you say is Death Shadow better than the Blue Red Murktide deck? What does it do better?
That's a good question. So we'll have to take a look at the deck list specifically, but I think literally the inclusion of Death Shadow is one of the reasons to play this deck. You also have access to like basically the same tools. You have Ragavan and also Ledger Shredder, but Death Shadow, Croxa, and then are there any black cards that we are very interested in? Fatal Pushdown and the Lock, things like that. It's just a
Obviously,
cheaper, leaner deck, I would almost imagine. It's hard to say. It's hard to compare leanness when both decks are kind of just like killing machines, but the big difference here is Murktide against Death Shadow, and I guess maybe you want that companion Giganta too. That's another big kicker.
mhm.
Like you can't play Giganta and Murktide together. So
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. By the way, and speaking of another expressive iteration deck, show me what you can do. I want to see it in action now. I
I
want to
can't,
be convinced.
I can't tell if you're laughing at the exact board state right now with Swamp Steam Vents in play, and you can see Steven's got 2 copies of Expressive Iteration in the hand right now, just unable to cast either of those. Really, just a
Uh,
brutal situation.
to be fair, this is one of the better expressive iteration decks, I would guess, since you already mentioned, right? It's pretty low to the ground. So if you get to finally find your third land and then maybe put the shadow into play, uh, that could be something. On the other hand, we are already under a lot of pressure, and that's another. Oh yeah, you don't want to see what's it called? Sanctifier in back? Is that
Yep.
the one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sanctifier is very strong here, giving pro red, pro black. Not pro red, pro black. Oh, no, it is pro red, pro black, but it exiles only black or red cards from the graveyard, and then also acts as like a pseudo rest in peace for black and red permanents as well, or spells too. Yeah, spells too.
Yeah, basically anything that hits the graveyard. So I guess that's going to be a construct here, and we will be able to. What are we going to pick up here with the Urza Saga?
There
Or
are a
has
couple
that already
options.
picked up to 2? Or maybe it's the trigger. But, well, the trigger has not yet been missed, but we will see.
Yeah, should be going up to 3 now, and then I would be very surprised if we actually made a construct on this board state. I think maybe. Oh yeah, looks like we may be making a play here. I don't know what the exact ruling on this kind of situation if we're missing the third, the enchantment uptick, but I would be very surprised if a construct comes into play this turn, given how many spells we have in our hand and how much mana that we can make. Oh yeah, okay, so
Yeah.
there it is. Okay, so
Okay, we're just
sacrificing
going
it,
to float
floating
the
it for
mana.
mana. Yeah, and that is a ginger brute. Okay, whoa, no, is this just gonna be lethal? Oh my goodness!
Dude,
All
we have
right,
the
wait.
Piercy Paladin. We can equip one of the things onto it. I think there's a fatal push on the other side of the board.
Okay. But one
So
does not simply tutor up Ginger Brute unless we are trying to do nefarious things.
I would guess the way Max has planned this out, right, is for the PST Paladin come down and then we try to equip both of the hammers onto the Gingerbrute and go to town, which from what I understand will be met with a fatal push or even a lightning bolt. We actually have 2 removal spells, so we can deal both with the Paladin and with the Gingerbrute.
Yeah, that is true. That's actually very good. Okay, I guess with Paladin on the stack, we're trying to figure out how we have to do this, and then yeah, I mean maybe just pushing the Gingerbrute right now, surveil with the Dragon's Rage Chandler, and then in response to the first equip, we
The thing is,
can.
if we get rid of the Gingerbrute, then there's not even Metalcraft anymore, right?
Oh yeah, that's a good point too. Right. Oh
So
yeah, I guess it's better sequencing bolting the Gingerbrute and then pushing the
Paladin, yeah.
yeah.
Because ideally, what you want here from Steven's side of the board is that Max just like plays another land and passes the turn, which could happen. Oh, there's a third hammer. Okay. Yeah, now we have to get the fatal push in here. We get another surveil trigger. That's hard to see what it is, but maybe it's going to stay on top.
I think we just want lands more than anything else. If it's not a mana source, I personally am just not interested. Look at those expressive iterations. They're just sitting there doing nothing. Like we're talking about this deck being just like super, super like low to the ground. You play like crazy strong threats like Death Shadow. You know, I guess I don't know, Solitude. That must answer one of your earlier questions about like
Yeah.
where Death Shadow kind of went. And okay, Ragavan technically works. That does generate the treasure token.
Yeah,
That does
that's.
give us some mana. Oof.
Wait, well, oh, okay, we get to steal that one. Oh, I'm very interested in stealing that one. You know, the super powerful, most high-end play is to just like take that one, play it, and then just naturally draw a land on the next turn.
Yeah. Okay, well, looks like Steven says no. But I feel like that's exactly the play that I would make, and then I would get very punished when there is no land on top of my deck. So this is just a tight play, we'll put it that way.
So this is, I think, Marsh of Otherworld Elite being picked up here. That could stem the bleeding a little bit, taking out the Dragon Rage channel here. But we'd forego the option to make a token. And I think like the 4/4 token looks pretty good.
Mm-hmm. This is absolutely maniacal, but I mean, this is like what, turn 4 or 5? And I'm sure. Yeah, it is. No, it is absolutely maniacal because you could just dash Ragavan and attack. Never mind. Is there a world where we actually go after that treasure token? And the answer is no.
Okay. Yeah, I think you might do it if you actually had something on board that's like wins the game on its own, so you don't need to add more stuff. But yeah. That would be something. Okay, so it looks like we are sitting on Unholy Heat, 2 copies of Expressive Iteration, Mr. Ragavan, and another card I can't really make out right now. But yeah, we just keep going in for 5. Wait. Oh, I guess we have Delirium, right? So the Unholy Heat could take out the Construct token. I guess that's the idea.
Okay. Surprised that we're not leading with Expressive Iteration here.
Yeah. That would have been able to maybe find another land, right?
Yeah, mana is the premium.
Now it's up on Max to find out what's the play. Do we March of the Unholy Light something here? Do we just like make the token? Because I think if Max hesitates here, he's aware that there's the option for Steven to just like kill the Construct token and get in there for all the damage. And we're going after the Dragon Rage. I mean, I guess that's fine, right? If you're mostly concerned about your life total, that's certainly the better play in the long run.
I'm actually really impressed / surprised about that. That's not what I would have expected because well, with the way the game's playing out, maybe let's double check the life totals and make sure that that's also updated as well, because I think last turn we attacked with a couple creatures and that wasn't reflected. So maybe that's what the real concern here is that we're low on life. And this is so dirty, by the way, using the tokens to cast this Expressive Iteration for functionally like no mana.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason that Ragavan is both one of the most popular and one of the most unpopular cards ever printed in the last couple of years, at least. So yeah, we find the land, and what are the other cards? There's a, oh god, yeah, we're gonna replace that Dragon Rage channel right away, probably.
Yeah, interesting because with the saga, if if that Saga was untapped, I almost wonder this game probably would have been different. We would have just taken the dress down to handle the two constructs pretty well. But right now, like, okay, with the life totals now updated, I think we're painting a clear picture of the story. So if
Oh
Steven
yeah.
is at 3, well then, that changes things by a lot, yeah.
Okay, so and Steven's also out of mana, right? I wonder, is there anything is there gonna be like a second Ginger Brood or something? Probably not. We already saw the first one taken care of. We got a Pithing Needle that we could find. Not sure if that's what you want against Death Shadow though. Other than that, there's not really super exciting stuff like Springleaf Drum, Shadow Spear. On Max, still deciding. Do I make a token? Do I go after some kind of artifact? Memnite maybe, but well, Ornithopter technically, but not really.
It's a very good question here. I mean, this is the turn that is going to matter here, you know, with Urza Saga not having made a single construct this entire game really does speak to how much pressure this Grixis Death Shadow deck can apply. And even that too, like the Death Shadow deck had something of a backwards draw. So it's really interesting to see how that sort of how the game has developed in such a way where Urza Saga didn't really feel like the best threat that it, or the best that it could possibly be, you know?
Yeah, especially since you're facing a flying threat, right? Maybe that's another big reason why we went after Dragon Red Chandler last turn, because we felt, like Max felt that he will be able to deal with anything on the ground eventually. If he's gonna win this game, he must. But the flyers are a little bit trickier to deal with.
Right. Updated life totals, by the way. So 14 to 3, that explains a lot now. Inkmoth Nexus, the potential blocker here for this Delirious Dragon's Rage Channeler. And if that is all there is, then I got bad news for you, Max, because there's an Unholy Heat there in the hand for Steven, and that's going to be good enough.
What are those two cards in Max's hand? I'm trying to...
There's at least a Pure Steel Paladin.
that one's not going to do it. Yeah, I think that might just be the game for Steven then.
Now, you mentioned March of the Otherworldly Light. If that's another card, if that's the other card in Max's hand, I mean, you could technically pitch the Pure Steel Paladin to cast the March, but then you're really just left with nothing.
Yeah. But then again, you could just like almost top deck into a win, but you'd need one more land, I guess, to fight like another Pure Steel Paladin, animate your Inkmoth Nexus, and just equip a bunch of hammers on it. But we're 1 mana short of actually doing that. Oh, and it looks like we're in time, so maybe Max is just like trying to stay alive to get across the line for a single point, at least for a single match point. But I'm not sure which extra turn this actually is.
Whoa! Okay, the other card was Blacksmith Skill, so this is actually a massive blowout here. Wow. Okay, so the second line of text on Blacksmith Skill, besides Hexproof, I think it also gives artifact creatures +2/+2. Correct me if I'm wrong there, which would trade with the Dragon's Rage Channeler. But now this Unholy Heat, mega blowout, and I really, really like the patience that Steven showed with the Unholy Heat, like not using it instantly with the Inkmoth Nexus animated to push through for those last few points of damage. This is like true discipline and like the exact sort of like mental state you want to be in when you're playing a deck like Grixis Death Shadow. Like just like play patiently, precisely, and always to the jugular, you know? No patience, no nothing like that.
Very much, and it feels like Steven was very much aware of that out that Max had, right? That's just like really speaks to it, like you mentioned. When you play the matchup a lot of times, you've been in that situations where you preemptively fired off the Unholy Heat. You feel like, oh, I got this game, and then you get blown out by the Blacksmith skill. If that has happened to you, you play around that, and you just win on the next turn, like Steven does here.
Yeah, and that's honestly kind of incredible. It makes me wonder if, you know, now that Yorion has been banned, the presence of 4 color control variants or Omnath, you know, whatever you want to call it, that makes me wonder if now we will actually see a rise in Grixis Death Shadow decks, specifically because Solitude gets a little bit worse in the format. I mean, there's still, you have to deal with cards like Leyline Binding and things like that. But that does take some time to develop, some time to set up. So I don't know. Really, really good to see Grixis Death Shadow on the map here, 3-0 going into the next round of the NRG Series 5K here in Ohio. But this is going to be the last round for myself and Julian. So I want to say thank you for everyone here. And we have Joe and Becky coming in for the next round. Stay tuned. Got some great content coming up.